Just welcome everyone to this informational session on the emergency rental assistance program that's going on currently in Alaska. That's designed to help tenants and landlords receive the rent that some people have had a lot of difficulty paying during this COVID-19 period. I'm Dan Coons. I'm a lawyer at Alaska Legal Services, as is Heather Parker. And we're very lucky and thankful to have two important folks from Alaska Housing Finance Corporation with us, Mike Courtney, Director of Operations, and Daniel Delfino, Director of Planning, I think is the official title. So welcome, and we'll just talk generally about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and why it's useful and why everyone should be interested and engaging with it. And feel free to type any questions you might have into the chat box, question box in Facebook Live, and we'll be happy to do our best to address those questions. So partly why we wanted to, as I said, I think a minute ago, partly why we wanted to hold this session is because we realize and understand that it's really important that landlords get paid the rent. We don't want people to get evicted. We don't want tenants facing homelessness or things like that. But we also realize that landlords are struggling, and here is this really important resource that's out there to help landlords. Okay, now you don't want to go forward. Oh, there we go. So luckily, there has been a large amount of money that's been given out by the federal government to address this problem. But let's look at the scope of the problem. Okay. Just some information from earlier this month from the U.S. Census Bureau. There are 7 million households in the country who are delinquent on rent, including 4.6 million with absolutely no confidence in their ability to make their next rent payment. So when the CDC moratorium that's currently in place until June 30th ends, those 4.6 million people will potentially face eviction for non-payment of rent. There's some chatter out there that maybe the eviction moratorium will be extended one more month, but that's by no means official yet. There had been a lot of concern that it wouldn't be extended another month, but it looks like that may be the case. We just don't know yet, and we might find out something about that today. But as you can see, millions of other people potentially face eviction once evictions for non-payment of rent open up again. So if there is a resource to pay those rent arrears and future rent, if someone is having income coming in, that would be a wonderful thing. And that's why the government passed the what now they divide into ERA1 and ERA2. If you recall, back in December 2020, a congressional bill passed. I can't remember what the specific name of that one was, but that set aside billions of dollars for rental assistance. And this is the money that is currently being administered by Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. I might say AHFC because lawyers tend to talk in acronyms, as do other people. But if I say AHFC, I mean Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. I'll try not to do that. That they're currently distributing that money, and the portion of that went to Alaska is $200 million. So there's currently $200 million that is kind of in the pipeline, being put out to Alaskans. I believe I saw the most recent report from AHFC that about 50 million had gone out thus far in the program. Secondly, there's what they call the ERA2, and this is, if you remember, in March 2021, there was another congressional bill that set aside several billion more dollars for rental assistance. My understanding, and Daniel or Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong, this money isn't kind of being distributed yet. It's been allocated to the state, $152 million, but the kind of system hasn't been set up yet completely, and you can't necessarily apply for it, and what's going to happen with that money and how different it might be managed. The first chunk of money isn't 100% clear yet. So we'll really be concentrating on ERA1 because that's what's currently happening. So when I sort of talk about how that works, and that's what we'll be focused on. There will be sort of a different program in the future, or maybe it'll be the same program, but we don't really know yet. So when we're talking about that ERA1 program, that was the program that people could apply for, tenants could apply for up through March 5th, 2021. So, anyone who applied by that point is either, wasn't eligible for the program, was eligible and has gotten, some of their rent paid, or is kind of pending their payment and going through the process. I guess, if I can just jump out and ask, Mike or Daniel, my understanding would be like if you hadn't applied prior to March 5th, there will be another opportunity to apply under, when the ERA2 funds become available. But right now, you have to wait for that, right? Do I understand that correctly?
This is Daniel. The line is a little blurry there, Dan, on ERA1 and ERA2. I can get into the details if you want, but we received so many applications when we opened up the round in March that we could, if we extended the the maximum eligibility for everyone up to 18 months as we can with ERA1 and 2 when you pair them together, we could spend all of the money for both programs just based on the application response that we got there. So from an accounting standpoint, there's a break between when a person becomes funded by ERA1 and ERA2, but there are some applicants that will never know that that actually happened, which program was paying their rent. There are discussions with all of our partners, and we are looking at doing another funding round for people who didn't apply by March 5th. But that's a discussion with all the funding partners that we have. Everyone has to make that decision at the same time and announce that. So there's strong interest in doing that. We haven't pulled the trigger on that just yet. That money would presumably come mostly from ERA2, but I'm just making that distinction to point out some of the ERA2 money is actually going to pay for some of the people that we have right now. The numbers as of this morning, we've approved $67 million in payments. So if you multiply that times 4, you see that we're way over $200 million just based on what we've approved already, if we annualize that for 12 months.
I see. Thank you. That's really helpful to know, that the two sort of groups of money are kind of, a little less separate than maybe I was thinking. And second, that there may be in the near future,
Yeah, there was a question in the Facebook chat, but I think it's mostly been answered. So the question is, will there be a secondary application process for ERA2 funding? And it sounds like there hasn't been a decision on that yet. Is that right?
There hasn't been an official decision. I have not heard a person say that they don't want to do it. So AHFC is partnering with 15 different tribal entities and the municipality of Anchorage. So we all have to make that decision together, but I believe there's a lot of support to go out and do a second round.
All right. Thank you. So, and again, please, Daniel or Mike, please feel free to provide some additional information. What I'm kind of taking from here, when I'm talking about the eligibility and things like that, is really from the higher level kind of Department of Treasury stuff. And I know there's a lot that's left open to the, excuse me just a minute. There we go. Someone's getting it. Okay. So I'm looking at stuff from the Department of Treasury, and I know AHFC has a lot of discretion as how that things are laid out. So it might be a little different than what I'm saying. So please correct me if I say anything that's kind of totally off. So not everyone is eligible for this rental relief assistance. There are kind of three main qualifications that you need to meet each of the three. So one or more individual within the household has to have qualified for unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant cost, or experienced other financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the COVID-19 outbreak. And one or more individuals within the household can demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. And finally, the household has a household income at or below 80% of the area median income. I'm taking this from the ERA one. That I know there are some small distinctions kind of between ERA 1 and ERA 2, so I know it's more complicated than that, but that's kind of the general eligibility guideline. Okay, so in terms of documenting eligibility, I just wanted to point out that for each of those three things, the first one, you have to show the loss of income. You can show that through documentary information, but you can also self-certify. Sometimes people have difficulty getting the documentary, paperwork in order to show that there's been a loss of income. Someone can self-certify. In addition, when it comes to showing the risk of homelessness, that one is kind of a bit more open to the grantee, meaning the person who, the organization that receives the money, such as Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. But that again should be, there should be, and I'm sure there are multiple ways in which you can show, yes, you would be at risk of homelessness if you would be at risk of homelessness if you didn't receive the emergency rental assistance. And finally, you have to show that income level because you can't be over 80% of the median income. And again, in addition to providing documents, you can self-certify to show that. So I just also wanted to talk about what these funds can be used for. I refer to it as emergency rental assistance, but it is more than just rental assistance. It includes rent and rent arrears, but it also will include utility and home costs, as well as arrears in utilities and home energy costs. So it's not just rent, it can include other expenses related to the person's housing. And even an additional group like potentially relocation, security deposits, late fees, or some other related expenses related to the housing issues. So keep in mind that those are all potential sources of debt that a tenant might have that could be covered.
And there's a couple more questions in the chat that I wanted to ask. The first was, are there any organizations who are able to assist with the application process for those who are living with challenges?
Well, my understanding is that a number of organizations are working with Alaska Housing Finance Corporation in terms of doing, well, first the intake process that, during the application process, and now that things are moving along. Are those all kind of, does a person reach out directly to AHFC and then that call or that request for help get forwarded to one of those organizations? Or could you go directly to one of those organizations that's helping out?
They have two paths, Dan. They can jump in for everyone on Facebook. This is Daniel. applicants can approach us through AHFC and say, I need help, or their case managers can say, I have an applicant that needs help. Can I fill out an application on their behalf? And we have the ability to give them the ability to fill out an application on their behalf through an online system. So our staff will help them in that regard. If they need help, but they don't have anyone to help them yet, we put them in touch with our existing grantees to see if there's a person in their area that can help them out. If they're in an area covered by one of our tribal partners, we'll reach out to one of our tribal partners to see if someone on their staff can help out with that particular applicant. And then we try not to do this as a lead, but if all else fails and there isn't anyone else to help out, we'll see what we can do internally.
Thank you. There's another question as well. What about those having problems getting a summary statement? I'm sorry. So I think this is kind of related about getting additional resources. One person indicated they're having a hard time getting a summary statement regarding their income. And they said, yeah, they're having a hard time getting a summary statement specifically on income relating to child support. Is there a good resource for that?
So with this person in particular, Dan, I don't know if our information is in the chat. This person might want to reach out to me and I can put them in touch with someone on this. The Treasury Guidance, unlike the CARES program, they didn't allow us to self-certify everyone for income. If a person has no income, we take their self-certification for that, as you can't provide documents that don't exist. But if they have income, Treasury forced us to actually look at it this time. They gave us some flexibility. They didn't say we had to look at 100% of your income sources. And that's why I'm encouraging this person to reach out to us, because we have a provision that says, if your application said you made, let's just make the math easy, $50,000 a year, but you provide us documentation for $42,000, we know we're missing 8,000, but 8,000 is within the 20% tolerance that we've set up that will approve the application. If you're under that 80%, you say you made 50,000, but you only provide us 25, then we come back to you and say, we need more documentation. We can't move forward based on this. With this source of income, Heather, I don't know how close we are on that to that 80% threshold. So someone may be thinking they have to provide more documentation than they need to, but we might be able to work with them in that regard. One of the challenges for us is that Treasury literally did say that we had to review documents. So we tried to make as much flexibility as we could in the program with that 20% rule without inviting the IG to excoriate us when they come out and audit us. So we'll try and do what we can for this person if they reach out to us. And if they already haven't got a good answer, I can look into it for them. We'll see what we can do.
Okay. It does say, it looks like they have called and left messages.
Yeah, we have a team downstairs. It's 20 to 25 people, depending on the day. They get between 600 and 800 calls a day, and it's a new staff. Some have been there for a bit, but if there's any point of confusion that we can address, sometimes we find out about things when they come in through the appeal queue. Like a good example is folks that were downstairs may have been providing guidance saying you're not eligible for the program if you're in a lease to own standpoint. Once that got up to us at the programmatic level through a couple of appeals, we're like, no, let's think about this. If a person doesn't own the property yet, they're in a lease to own or a rent to own, they are still technically a renter, so we think that person is good. And I'm just bringing this up not to undercut our team downstairs. It's just sometimes it takes a while for a specific situation to get up to us at a programmatic level where we can review it and maybe provide more clarity for our team downstairs.
And this is Mike Courtney. I just wanted to jump in for a minute on the income piece. I volunteered downstairs to assist with the temps for a few weeks when the program first started. And I was very impressed with the attitude that they've got in the instructions they have from Daniel's department, in that they try to be as obviously our job is to keep people in housing. And so when they're looking at those income statements, they're trying to be as generous as possible. And that when they see that 20, the one issue is if the income is within 20%, but it doesn't quite match, we accept it anyway. So I saw a lot of really good decisions being made downstairs about accepting people. And of course, there's always those outliers where in the case of the child support, where it's a little more difficult to show that. But again, if it was within the 20%, they'd get accepted. So they're trying to be as liberal as possible is the comment I was trying to make.
Okay, so it sounds like, and thank you for that. And it sounds like if folks have questions, they can call Alaska Housing. One person commented that they don't have phone access. Is there a good email or different way for them to contact Alaska Housing?
Yes, we do have an email address. I can provide that to you. I don't want to guess because we have a bunch of them right now for all of our different programs, and I don't want to use the wrong one, but we do have an email box for folks who don't feel comfortable with the phone.
Okay, awesome. And then there was one more question, and it might be, I'm sorry, Dan. And then I promise I'll pass it back to you. There was one more question, which was, do payments go directly to landlords?
Yes, payments go directly to landlords and they go directly to the utility companies. As a general rule, that's the way it goes. There have been some exceptions to this case. Being in the real world, not all landlords, I'm just going to say it, most of our landlords are really by the book, care about their tenants. I've had landlords come and meet us in the parking lot to drop off stuff for their tenants. So a lot of landlords genuinely care about their tenants and are trying to work with us on the program. There are landlords out there that we hear about through the appeals process where maybe they're not reporting their rental income to Treasury. And for one reason or another, they're not comfortable providing their tax ID information and they don't want to work with the tenant. If we can verify, we go through a very rigorous process with that applicant. If we can verify that that tenant has been paying that landlord a consistent amount, and we can verify that it is a legitimate landlord, that it's not their brother or their sister or some other person that they created just to say no, we do have an appeal process where we can provide relief directly to the tenant. However, that's not our first option for all the tenants. We make sure that there is a legitimate reason why we can't pay the landlord before we get to that step. So if tenants do have a landlord that will not participate in the program, and I know that they do exist, they're a small number, but they do exist, we work with them to make sure that they're not going to lose their housing because of that. And that's even in the first program. I know ERA 2 that Dan talked about, that requires that we pay directly to the tenants. If the landlord refuses, we make that option. And we had this conversation with Dan a while ago and made this commitment. It's sincere. We've done it for a couple of folks. That even on ERA 1, where we don't have to do that, if a person is dealing with a landlord that will not participate, we will work with that tenant.
So for that, would the tenant need to contact Alaska Housing directly?
Yes,
Kind of the
usually
same
what they do
process.
is appeal and say, my landlord won't participate. You have to find some other way. And then we have a smaller team of people that follows up with those particular folks, and it's sort of an escalated queue group, and they'll ask a couple of questions. So like say Dan was asking for help, we'd be like, okay, Dan, your landlord won't accept it. Do you have any proof that you've been paying your landlord this in the past? Can you show us a canceled check? So can you show us something that shows that you've paid this amount consistently to this person in addition to lease, so we can make sure that there is a real transaction history to follow to support it. And if we can, and we can't get a hold of that landlord, then we would release it. We have to go through these steps because we have, we've been seeing an increasing incidence of entrepreneurship in terms of, well, some odd lease arrangements and things like that crossing state lines. There have been a number of creative partnership agreements that people have created to try and access funding here. So we're trying to be as fair as we can to the tenants while also being responsive to the ways that some folks are trying to game the system because we just have to make sure that we have integrity in all the stuff that we're doing.
So Dan, I'm sorry, there's a couple more questions on the chat.
Fantastic.
So one of them I just wanted to clarify something. So you said there's a phone number, there's an email. Someone in the chat mentioned using Facebook Messenger. Is that a way to communicate with Alaska Housing?
It is. We don't. We have a team of 25 people answering the phones. We have a team of, I believe, 2 channeling social media, and they don't do it full time. So that is a way to get in touch with us. We will respond. I can't speak to the speed. HFC posts on Facebook, and there are folks that respond to our posts. And I believe the standard response is send us a direct message and we'll follow up with you. So the agency does communicate with people that way too.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question for utility assistance. Do homeowners paying a mortgage qualify?
For this program, no. The federal government would not allow us to do anything for homeowners under this program. It specifically said utility assistance had to be to renter households in this bill. There is a homeowner relief program that is coming down the pipe. Treasury has not released the application form for us to submit our application on that yet, but the state of Alaska was allocated $50 million specifically for homeowner relief, and utilities for homeowners will be a part of that.
Okay. And then another question is, are native dividends part of taxable income when the money comes from a native corporation trust?
I'm going to dodge this question a little bit, and I don't want to sound like a lawyer, but we're not lawyers or accountants. What we tell people is if they report it on their as their taxable income, then that would show up. Then that would be something that they would have to claim. The income standard that we use that Dan referenced, that 80%, that's based on your adjusted taxable income. So whatever folks are reporting as their adjusted gross income on their personal tax returns, that's the income that we would use to calculate whether or not you're at that 80%.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think those specifics are frankly more useful than a sky high, the kind of sky high overview I'm giving. But just as a general rule, under ERA 1, I know the assistance is up to 12 months rental assistance. I think there were some, it was a little more fine-tuned for that second group of money. But that's generally what we're looking at is 12 months of rental assistance. You know, again, including both rent arrears and rent going into the future. Just some other issues I wanted to address. I mean, we talked about this, Daniel was just talking a bit about this a minute ago, you know, this whole idea of landlord participation and what the options are when maybe a landlord isn't participating, but as Daniel mentioned as well, a lot of landlords are very engaged in the process, it sounds like, and moving forward, and then that makes perfect sense, given that this is a program that benefits tenants and landlords. But there is an option out there if you have a landlord who's not participating. This program can apply to hotels and motels if someone is a long-term resident there. It can also apply to rent-to-own situations while they're still in the rent-paying portion where a person hasn't pursued the sort of option to actually purchase the property. And it can also apply to mobile homes and mobile home spaces. So it's important to know that this can cover a variety of different kinds of housing, not simply the your standard apartment building or home rental. And then I just wanted to put up a couple places to look for additional information. AHFC has a good FAQ kind of page at the following link, and as does the Department of Treasury about the program. So that can be helpful in terms of seeing what the parameters of the program are, or regarding AHFC's site, your own personal, the status of your own application, or, if a landlord wants more information about how Alaska Housing is administering the program. So that's really all I had sort of formally to just go over. We've had some questions. Please feel free to bring up any more questions if you have them, but I wanted to just check in with Mike and Daniel and see if they had any particular things to add that they thought folks ought to know about the status of the program, and how to address their own applications.
Well, I can just provide a couple of updated numbers and then a few things that I'm hearing from the relief team downstairs. We have the daily, or it's a weekly dashboard that's on HFC's website. There's a link to it right on our homepage where you can see how much we've paid out over the past week. That number is up to $55 million as of this morning. 67 million has been approved. So on a 12-month basis, that's $268 million just in program funds. We are over 3/4 of the way through the queue of income eligible people have either been approved or we found out they weren't eligible for the program. The remaining, it's under a quarter now. The majority of them are being worked actively by our relief specialists at our processing partners. There are only, as of yesterday afternoon, 185 people who had uploaded all the documents that had yet to be contacted by a relief specialist. So whether the moratorium was extended today or if it's not, we expect everyone will be contacted by the end of this month. We're well on pace to do that. And we're moving to the stage where we're getting ready to start reissuing payments to the first people who were paid back in March and April for their next 3 months of rent and utility assistance. And we're expecting that process to go considerably smoother because for most of them, all we have to do is say, Dan, has anything changed since the last time? Is your landlord still this person? Do you still owe this much in rent? Boom, you're approved, the check gets cut. So the systems are in place to make that process a lot smoother for the people who are going to be in their second round of assistance. And because that system is going to be smoother, we have the teams and we have the staffing resources that would be freed up to support a second application round for ERA2 rental assistance. And that's what we're working through with our partners. The call volume, it fluctuates with the people trying to get through to the relief specialists. There tends to be a big spike on Mondays, so that's usually where I think most people are going to have voicemails or they may have a hard time getting a hold of someone on the first try. But our call center people should be responding to every call within 24 hours or 1 business day, depending on when that person was called. The further we get into the program and we're getting to the folks that have been waiting in line patiently for 3 months, it's been a while for them and it's a very real issue for them and their landlords. The conversations are becoming a bit more intense. Our staff reported that 25% of the 600 to 800 calls that they get each day are characterized as verbally abusive. So it's getting intense. These are not easy calls for some of our folks. So we're getting more animated discussions at this stage. And sometimes it's from people who have been rejected or they submitted a document that wasn't what we needed, or they thought they were approved, but actually they had to submit more documentation. So we're seeing a lot of that. And I'm bringing this up mainly for you, Dan, and for the other folks that may be on this call with the escalated issues. Usually we find that we've talked to a person before, or there's something that's a hang up in the application that we're still trying to sort through. So we knew that we were going to get to this stage where, and that appears to be where we're at, where a lot of the folks that are remaining in the queue have been called, or we've been trying to get a hold of them for 2 or 3 times. And it takes a little bit more work to get these last applications approved than the first tranche of applications. So they tend to be more intense discussions, and we're seeing more escalated issues as we get to the final portion of the queue.
And Dan, this is Mike Courtney. I think the message also that we want out is we're trying to be as flexible as we possibly can. We want to help as many people as we can. Obviously, there's going to be a few issues, and I think that's where some people get frustrated, where they might have problems uploading their documents, or they're not technically savvy. And that I know that's where your question came from earlier about who can assist. But we are trying to be as flexible as possible. We want to keep everyone in their housing stably that we can. And I think that's the message we want. And this money came in very suddenly, and we Daniel's department had to staff up in a huge way, to the point where we had to use some temp agencies to get those folks in for us. But interacting with them every day, I know that they care. They're trying really hard, and they want to get this volume of people resolved and satisfied and paid. So we're doing our best in a situation where we got an awful lot of money all at once. And we really appreciate the chance to have a conversation about this today.
And I don't know, because I can't see from our view like how many people are on or how many people may be watching. But to Mike's point, when the folks were downstairs reviewing income for the first time, whenever there are people that have a question, the single piece of advice probably everyone working in the program has heard from, like me in particular, or any one of their supervisors, is we're here to get people to yes. We're not here to try and prove that we're smarter. We're not going to be like, aha, they're not eligible for the program. We're here to get people to yes. We're not here to stop people from accessing money. We're here to help people with the funds that we've been allocated. Our staff takes every allegation, fraud, or abuse very seriously. They never, ever turn a blind eye to something if they think something improper is going on. But when it comes to dealing with applicants, if something is on the margins, we always try and get people to yes. That's the company culture that we've tried to instill in the staff that are working downstairs. And that's what we've shared with all of our processing partners, is to get people to yes. So if there's a way for us to get them there without breaking a program rule or engaging in some form of really wasteful practice, our default is to get them to yes and to give them help.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could take a minute to just talk about the logistics. Are there specific steps a landlord needs to take to be able to get like a check from Alaska Housing? And there's also a question, if like a landlord has several tenants, does that landlord need to respond to every single tenant's application, or could you just talk about the process for that?
Sure. I'm going to try and use a modern example, and hopefully this won't blow up in my face. The system that we have right now, it's a little bit different than those of us who work in different businesses, where you have to set up a vendor for your accounting system. They fill out a form, and then it gets attached to each payment. And then there's a record in your accounting file for every transaction. It's not quite set up like that for this program. So like Heather, if you have a business and you're renting to Dan, and you're also renting to Mike, you can go into our system and register and say, Heather Parker Rentals. My tax ID number is this. This is my business. And you'll get loaded up into our system, almost like someone who has a PayPal account, or someone who goes into something where there's an electronic payment system where you register, and then anyone on the internet or with that app can send you a payment because you registered. It's set up like that for all the landlords. Landlords register through our system, and then they provide their information, whether or not they want to get paid with a physical check, or if they want to have an electronic funds transfer. We have a place for them to provide their accounting information so we can pay folks electronically. What that enables us to do is when Dan submits an application and Mike submits an application, Dan knows my landlord is Heather Parker. He's able to say Heather Parker, the relief specialist, and when they're processing the application, they're like, okay, here we go. We know it's Heather. Mike doesn't know you're his landlord. So Mike's talking to a relief specialist, like, well, where do you write the check? Do you know the person's name? Do you know the address? They look up an address for Mike's property. They see it's one of the properties that you own. The relief specialist will be able to associate Mike's application with you. So there are many ways for the relief specialist to take any one of the applications and link them up to you. Alternatively, if Mike just doesn't know who his landlord is or anything, but he knows your email address, he can send you a link from his application, and then you'll be able to respond to his email that said, hey, Heather, can you help me out with their application? When you upload that information, it will automatically get associated with Mike's file, so Mike's application can be approved. And then if you weren't in the system before, you'll all of a sudden be in the system. So if you have another tenant who hasn't sent you that email, the release specialist will hopefully be able to find you in the system and load you up that way. And what that enables them to do is have a standardized portal for the landlords, so we can track all the payments going to the landlords and issue the 1099s at the end of the year for the landlords. In addition to the applicant status check that we have for folks, so if Dan wants to see where he's at in the program, he can type in his HR number and see, oh, I've been approved for payment or a payment's been made. We also have something set up for landlords. So a landlord can log in and see all of the properties that are associated with them, and then the payments that have been made to their properties and who those payments are for. We don't tell the landlord who has applied in the system. We only tell them once the person has been approved for payment, because then they're getting the money anyway. That it's no longer a secret. But once the payment has been approved, the landlord should be able to go in and see every single payment that has been cut to them from all the different processing teams and who it's for and for what amount.
Okay, thank you. I've got quite a backlog of questions, it looks like, on Facebook. So I'll try and be efficient, I guess. So one question is, if you're approved for 3 months, is there a way to be reevaluated for full 12 months? Does that question make sense?
It does. Treasury requires us to check in with everyone every 3 months. So if we approved you in the past, we have to, and it's just going to be a very simple certification for most people. They get an email asking if anything has changed. If they, there are a couple of nuances to it, but the gist of it is we have to check in with you every 3 months. For a lot of folks, it's a very simple process if nothing has changed.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, do you pay condo fees?
Condo fees, I don't believe so, because it's more of a home ownership thing. I don't believe, unless it was included in a person's rent, that it would be an eligible expense here.
Okay. Another question is, do individuals, oh, I'm having a hard time seeing all the questions. Do individuals get preference, for example, veterans?
No, there isn't a preference on that. The preference that we implemented was the federal priority for people who are below 50% area median income, or people who had been unemployed for 90 days or more at the time of application. That was the federal priority that we had to establish, but 86% of our applications satisfied that federal priority. So there were a lot of folks who thought, I'm in a priority queue, I should be one of the first people paid. Why haven't I been paid after 2.5 months? Like, well, 86% of the applications all met that definition too.
Okay. Another question is, do you pay security deposits?
Security deposits, no. We will pay late fees though.
Okay. There was kind of a follow-up question to a previous question that related to the child support thing. And the question was, can Alaska Housing Finance Corporation like get proof of income directly from child support or from Social Security?
We have the applicants acquire the information for us. If we had to go out and directly acquire the information for 25 to 30,000 people, we wouldn't have a workable system. So if people can provide that information to us, we're certainly going to accept it. However, we can't go and request it on their behalf. So like, for example, the landlord who met me in the parking lot and asked, hey, I have a tenant who's applied to your program. They don't have this. Can I just give this to you? And said, yes, I'll go, I'll scan it in and I'll associate it with their file. If someone sends us information for an application, we can upload it and attach it. We can't approach another state department or the Social Security Administration and try and acquire it for them though.
Okay, and earlier we talked about if someone's having a hard time gathering documents, maybe they can reach out to you and you can help put them in contact with a partner agency who might be able to help with that process.
Yes, we fund over 30 nonprofits all around the state that help people out in these situations, and it fits within the scope of what they do, even if they're not directly involved in administering this program.
All right, I'm just checking and making sure we've got all the questions. So this question, I think this is relating to like proof of income. And the question is like to like prove your income. What do you do when the IRS, oh, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but it sounds like, what if you don't have a copy of your taxes due to unemployment? Is there anything else you could provide to Alaska Housing to provide proof of your income?
I need to know a little bit more about what the income sources were, but the tax records, I think there should be some way to download this information. But we probably need to have a conversation with that person specifically.
Okay. So I think, I guess for folks listening to Facebook Live, if I missed a question, like please put it in the chat again. I wanted to say thank you again so much to Daniel and to Mike for joining us and for answering all these questions. Is there anything else like you'd like folks to know about this program?
Just to reiterate Mike's point, the people downstairs that are trying to answer the phones, they are doing the best that they can. So just please be patient. They don't have the ability to cut you a check or to get your tenant's application approved. That's someone else. So there are only so many tools we've empowered them with. So just please be a little understanding. We're trying to help out everyone that we can as fast as humanly possible. And we're here to get everyone help that we can get help.
Well, unless we see any new questions, I know there's a several second delay between Facebook Live and we're talking in Zoom. So, but yeah, I just to reiterate what Heather said, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Daniel, for making yourselves available and bearing the lion's share of the questions. So thank you. It's very appreciated, and the information has been very helpful.
Yeah, I think Daniel definitely carried the heavy load here.
Yeah.
It's all right. Just happy to have the invitation and the opportunity to speak whenever it's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like we do have a couple more comments. So the unemployment question might be in reference to amended tax returns from getting unemployment. I don't know if that helps clarify that question or changes any nuance to it.
No, it sounds like it's related to someone's specific application. So that person should probably talk to someone downstairs.
Okay. And then another question, do landlords find out how much assistance their tenants will receive? We're notified of individuals, but don't learn the amount.
Landlords, every landlord that's registered in the system should have the ability to go into the system and see how much has been paid to them, what the individual amounts were for each tenant, and what those amounts were for. So that information should be online for anyone to look up and download using their landlord record.
Okay, thank you.
And we also have people downstairs that handle questions specifically from landlords. So if there's a question about how those things work, people can call that same 800 number and they'll be able to get in touch with someone who can walk them through that process if they haven't used it before.
Is there a special phone number for landlords?
There isn't. It's just if they say that they're a landlord, the representatives downstairs know to route it off to a different person on the team.
Okay. Just checking for extra questions, and I don't think I see additional ones. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we really appreciate it. It was a nice mix of questions. Thanks for everyone who participated today.
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.